The historic mansion loomed at the end of a long, winding driveway, its ivy-covered walls and Gothic architecture hinting at a past steeped in mystery. The group of friends, Emma, Jake, Sarah, and Liam, had rented it for a weekend escape, eager to explore its grand halls and bask in its eerie charm. They were drawn to its allure, a house frozen in time, with creaking floorboards and dusty chandeliers. The first evening passed uneventfully as they laughed over dinner and exchanged ghost stories by the fireplace. But on the second day, while wandering through the mansion's labyrinthine halls, Sarah noticed something strange, a section of the wallpaper that didn't quite match. Her curiosity got the better of her, and as she ran her fingers over the wall, she felt the faint outline of a door. "Guys, come here," she called out. The others gathered around as she pushed on the hidden panel. With a groan, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading up into darkness. "What do you think is up there?" Liam asked, shining his flashlight into the void. "Only one way to find out," Emma said, already ascending the steps. At the top, they found another door, this one locked with a heavy rusted padlock. Jake rummaged through a nearby storage closet and returned with a crowbar. With a few determined swings, the lock snapped open and the door swung inward, revealing a forgotten room cloaked in dust and shadow. The air inside was cold and stale, carrying a faint metallic tang. The room was furnished with old wooden chairs, a table covered in wax drippings, and a bookshelf filled with crumbling tomes. But what caught their attention were the photographs and diary entries scattered across the table. The photographs, yellowed with age, depicted a group of solemn-faced people in ceremonial robes. Their eyes seemed unnaturally dark, their expressions blank. Some of the pictures showed symbols scrawled on the walls of the mansion, symbols eerily similar to those they had noticed in the house earlier. Jake picked up one of the diaries, its cover cracked with age. The handwriting inside was shaky, as if written in haste. The entries spoke of rituals to summon the Watcher, a being described as eternal, ever-seeing, and bound to the house. "This is insane," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Emma flipped through another book, her face growing pale. "These aren't just rituals. These are sacrifices." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the jovial atmosphere of their getaway replaced by a creeping dread. As they began to explore the room further, the air seemed to grow heavier. The door behind them creaked shut on its own, and the temperature plummeted. "We need to leave," Liam said, his voice tight with fear. But when they turned to leave, the door wouldn't budge. The knob refused to turn, and even Jake's crowbar couldn't pry it open. A faint whisper filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. The friends huddled together, their flashlights darting around the space. Shadows began to twist and writhe on the walls, taking on grotesque shapes. "It's the symbols," Emma gasped. "They're moving." The symbols etched into the walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly light, their lines shifting and rearranging into an unrecognizable script. Then the whispers stopped, replaced by a low, guttural voice. "You have awakened me." The friends turned toward the source of the voice and froze. A figure had materialized in the corner of the room, tall, gaunt, and shrouded in shadow. Its eyes were pits of darkness, and its long, spindly fingers reached toward them. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally. Liam lunged at the door, pounding on it with all his strength. "Let us out!" The figure stepped closer, and the air grew suffocatingly thick. Jake grabbed a chair and hurled it at the entity, but it passed through as if it were made of smoke. "The book!" Emma cried, grabbing one of the diaries. "It has to have a way to stop this." She flipped frantically through the pages until she found an entry describing a counter-ritual. "We need to draw the symbols in reverse." Using the wax from the candles on the table, they hastily scrawled the symbols on the floor, their hands shaking with fear. The figure roared, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Hurry!" Sarah shouted as the room began to tremble. The final symbol was completed just as the figure lunged toward them. A blinding light filled the room, and the air was sucked from their lungs. When the light faded, the door creaked open and the figure was gone. They stumbled out of the room, slamming the hidden door shut behind them. Without a word, they grabbed their belongings and fled the mansion, vowing never to speak of what they had seen. The mansion remains, its walls holding the secrets of the forgotten room. And deep within, the watcher waits, bound by the symbols, but ready to return when curiosity dares to unlock the door again. Jacob was desperate for a job. Fresh out of college with no real prospects, he jumped at the chance to work as a night guard at the town's old cemetery. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent, the hours were quiet, and the isolation was a welcome change from the chaos of the city. Besides, how hard could it be to watch over a bunch of graves? The cemetery had a reputation, of course. Locals whispered about strange occurrences, about guards who left without notice or disappeared entirely. But Jacob wasn't one for ghost stories. He shrugged off the warnings and reported for his first shift on a chilly October evening. The graveyard sprawled across acres of land, dotted with rows of weathered headstones, crumbling mausoleums, and statues that loomed like sentinels in the moonlight. A thin mist clung stubbornly to the ground, and the air was unnervingly still, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Jacob's guard shack was a cramped wooden structure near the entrance, equipped with a flickering bulb, a thermos of coffee, a battered walkie-talkie, and a rickety chair. He spent the first few hours strolling along the gravel paths, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. At first, everything seemed normal, peaceful even. The graveyard exuded a somber beauty under the moonlight, and Jacob found himself oddly relaxed. But as the clock neared midnight, the atmosphere shifted. It started with faint laughter. Jacob froze in his tracks, his breath visible in the cold air. The laughter was distant, high-pitched, and childlike. He shone his flashlight across the rows of headstones, expecting to see teenagers playing a prank. But there was nothing. "It's probably just the wind," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But as the night wore on, the sounds grew more frequent. Footsteps crunched on the gravel paths, always just out of sight. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, but when he turned, there was nothing there. Near the oldest part of the cemetery, Jacob came across a peculiar sight. A statue of an angel standing beneath a gnarled oak tree. Its arms were outstretched, its face serene. But something about it felt wrong. Jacob couldn't put his finger on it, but the longer he stared, the more unnerved he became. Shrugging off his discomfort, he continued his patrol. Yet an hour later, when he passed the same spot, the angel seemed different. Its head was tilted slightly downward, its blank eyes appearing to stare directly at him. "That's creepy," Jacob muttered, backing away. Back at the guard shack, he found an old logbook tucked away in a drawer. It detailed the shifts of previous guards, but many entries ended abruptly. No explanations, no notes, just blank pages where records should have been. Then he found the last entry, scrawled hastily in shaky handwriting. "The laughter won't stop. If anyone reads this, leave. Don't let them find you." Jacob shivered, slamming the logbook shut. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie crackled to life. A distorted voice whispered his name. "Jacob!" He dropped the device, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" The laughter outside grew louder, echoing through the cemetery like a sinister chorus. Grabbing his flashlight, Jacob bolted from the shack, his nerves fraying with each passing second. The mist thickened as he ran, and the graveyard seemed to transform around him. The paths twisted unnaturally, leading him in circles. The headstones, once familiar, now appeared foreign, their inscriptions unreadable. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted movement. A figure stood among the graves, a man in a tattered suit with his back to Jacob. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," Jacob called, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Jacob approached cautiously, his flashlight trained on the man. But when he reached the spot, the figure was gone. Only the faint impression of footsteps in the dew-covered grass remained, leading deeper into the mist. Jacob stumbled back to the guard shack, desperate for safety. But when he opened the door, he found the logbook lying open on the desk, the pages filled with the same phrase over and over. "Don't let them find you." Before he could react, a sharp knock came at the window. Jacob turned slowly, his heart in his throat. The angel statue was outside, its stone face pressed against the glass. He screamed, stumbling backward as the window shattered. Shadows poured into the room, engulfing him. The laughter grew deafening, the sound filling his ears until everything went black. The next morning, the cemetery was silent once more. The guard shack stood empty, the shattered window replaced as if nothing had happened. Another name was added to the logbook, a new guard assigned to the next shift. And deep among the graves, the angel statue stood watch, waiting for the next visitor to arrive. Samantha sat alone in her favorite cafe, the warm aroma of roasted coffee beans wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Her phone was a dull glow in her hands, the news feed scrolling by as she absent-mindedly sipped her caramel latte. It was then she noticed the black leather-bound notebook on the table beside her. Its sleek, unmarked cover and slightly worn edges piqued her curiosity. After a quick glance around to ensure no one was returning for it, she flipped open the cover. The first page greeted her with elegant handwriting, each letter meticulously shaped, as though the writer had crafted every word with care. March 14th, 2:15 p.m. Samantha orders a caramel latte, extra hot, wears a green scarf. March 15th, 8:30 p.m. Watches Sunset Drive at Cinelux Theater, sits in the back row. Her fingers froze mid-flip, her pulse quickening, her name, her habits, her life, documented in chilling detail. The coffee cup in her hand trembled as she skimmed further. The pages went on, each entry a precise account of her days, her morning jogs, her shopping trips, even private moments in her apartment. Some events were mundane, others eerily intimate. As her unease deepened, she came across the final entry. April 2nd, 9 p.m. Samantha finds the notebook. She will take it home. Her eyes darted to her watch. 9 p.m. Clutching the notebook, she hurried out of the cafe, her thoughts a blur of fear and disbelief. At the police station, Samantha recounted her discovery, the notebook a tangible testament to her unease. The officer on duty listened, but dismissed it as a tasteless prank. Frustrated, she took the notebook home, determined to uncover the truth herself. The following days brought no solace. Each morning, new entries greeted her, written in a handwriting identical to hers. They documented her previous day's activities with unsettling accuracy and described events as they unfolded. Worse, the notebook began predicting her future. Flipping to the last page revealed chilling forewarnings of her next move, always impossibly correct. April 4th, 11 p.m. Samantha will stay awake, unable to sleep. April 5th, 7:30 a.m. Samantha will cry in the shower, overwhelmed by paranoia. Every entry was a hammer driving her closer to madness. The feeling of being watched crept into every corner of her life. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside her apartment. Shadows danced outside her windows when no one should have been there. She installed cameras, but playback showed nothing unusual. One night, she woke with a start. The notebook lay open on her bedside table, its pages illuminated by moonlight. Her trembling hands turned to the latest entry. April 6th, 3 a.m., Samantha confronts the truth. A name appeared repeatedly in the entries: Alex. Samantha remembered the barista at the cafe who always seemed so cheerful, his greetings warm but lingering a little too long. The entries placed him at her side, on the street, at the library, outside her building. The next day, she confronted him. "What is this?" she demanded, slamming the notebook on the counter. Alex stammered, his face pale, denying everything. His nervousness only confirmed her suspicions. That night, she followed him after his shift, tailing him through dimly lit streets to his apartment. There, in a hidden room, Samantha found photos of herself pinned to the walls, scribbled notes matching the entries in the notebook. Relief mingled with terror. She had found her stalker. But before she could call the police, she noticed a new entry. April 7th, 11:59 p.m. Samantha accuses the wrong person. Her phone buzzed with a notification. A photo. Herself standing in Alex's apartment, holding the notebook. A caption followed. "It's not Alex you should fear, it's yourself." Samantha returned home in a daze, her grip on reality slipping. The notebook's entries now described her every thought, her every move, as though it anticipated her actions. The lines between her and the writer blurred. In the end, the truth unraveled her. The final scene showed her hunched over a desk, her hand furiously scribbling in the notebook. Her laughter echoed in the empty apartment, filling the silence with a sound that was both triumphant and deranged. As the camera panned to her reflection in a mirror, her face twisted into a haunting grin. Her whispered words lingered. "It's always been me."